Hey there everyone, and welcome to another video. In this video today, I want to share a chart example of a famous person. The chart we're going to take a look at today is of Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister who recently resigned. And we're going to look at some timing indicators in her chart that might symbolize some of the things that she expressed in her speech when she announced she was going to stand down. So we're going to take a look at a core transit and an important progressed moon thing or a progressed thing in Jacinda Ardern's chart. And this is reminding me to tell you about my Predicting with Progressions course, which is a 4-part online training where I take you through all the essentials that you need to know about secondary progressions, what they are, how to work with them, and how to use them in predictive astrology. And the next live cohort for my Predicting with Progressions class is starting on February 20th. So if you're listening to this before then or near then, you can sign up immediately and join the next live group, which includes live Q&A sessions. And if you're watching this sometime after February of 2023, you are welcome to still take the class just on your own schedule. And I'll put the link for that below. So secondary progressions are one of my favorite timing tools. I use them in every consult I do with clients where we're looking at the year ahead or we're looking to do some astrological forecasting. So what I'm going to do first is pop up Jacinda's chart on the screen and talk a little bit about this chart. Now, what I do want to say as we're getting started is that we don't have a birth time for Jacinda. So we have a date on record that she was born, but so far I've been unable to find an exact birth time for her. Of course, that might change in the future, but for now we're doing timing without a birth time, which is also something that's important to have a little bit of awareness about, because as you build your practice as a consulting astrologer, you will come across clients and you will have people want to work with you around astrology who don't know what time they're born. And both transits and progressions are techniques that you can use for timing for a chart when there isn't an exact birth time. When we don't have a birth time for a chart, the couple of things we need to modify or adapt. With no birth time, we don't have the houses sequence set out. So the default time that I use when somebody says, I don't have a birth time, or I'm looking at the chart of a famous person who doesn't have a birth time, I like to use a sunrise chart. So I basically place the sun on the ascendant within a degree or two. And so in this sort of sunrise chart, and in any sunrise chart, the sun sign and the rising or ascendant sign will be the same. When we don't have an exact birth time, we're sort of doing the best we can without that layer of information. And this is my preferred way of approaching that. So in this instance, I wouldn't necessarily be thinking about 10th house this or 7th house that, but I do need to anchor in a degree for each planet. And the only planet that we need to have some caution around when we're doing timing in a birth chart where there isn't a birth time is the moon. The moon is the quickest moving of all planets. It can cover up to 15 degrees in a 24-hour period. And so even though we could fairly confidently say Jacinda has the moon in Capricorn, it's hard to say whether she has the moon at 4, 5, or 6 degrees of Capricorn, or if she has the moon at 15, 16, 17 Capricorn. So the one thing I would have some reluctance to do would be transits to the degree of the natal moon in a chart where there's no birth time. But for pretty much all other transits, other transits to other planets in the chart, we could certainly go ahead and do that. And there is some fun predictive work we can do with secondary progressions as well. So one thing that really stood out to me when Jacinda resigned was in her speech, she talked about having taken some time over the Christmas end of year break and realizing that she didn't have anything left in the tank to keep going as leader of her country, leader of her party. In a parliamentary system like New Zealand, the leader of the party is the leader of the country. And so she really was basically saying, I haven't got the energy to keep going. And that was really interesting to me because that's a very specific statement. And it's not often what you hear from politicians or other leaders who are stepping down. Often they say things like, I'm stepping down to spend time with my family. And usually, you know, there's some sort of scandal happening in the background. And that's just the sort of appropriate or socially acceptable reason. So I thought this was a little bit more of an honest reason to say, I'm stepping down. I do have, you know, a really senior position. I'm at the top of my game. If you're in the political world, and I just don't have the energy to keep going. That's what Jacinda basically said. Her exact words were something like, I haven't got enough in the tank to keep going. And there may be other political reasons behind this. You know, this is certainly not a commentary on her political positions and things like that. It's just a really interesting public example of somebody saying, I don't have enough to keep doing what I'm doing. And that made me curious about what is the astrology behind what might be going on for her that indicates her acknowledging, I don't have the energy, the drive, I don't have the enthusiasm or the motivation right now. So the first thing I noticed from a transit perspective is that transiting Neptune has been opposing Saturn. Now, I'm not the best drawer, even if I wasn't doing this on the screen, but transiting Neptune has been moving through the latter part of Pisces, and that means it's been in an opposition with her Saturn at 23 degrees of Virgo. Now, the Saturn in her chart is probably not in the second house, and we're not worried so much about the house placements right now. We're just looking at the fact that transit Saturn, since the middle of 2021, in fact, has been going through 23 degrees of Pisces, opposing her Saturn. And for part of that period, it has also been squaring Venus in her chart as well. And we know that Neptune as a planet tends to dissolve things. It tends to wash things away. It is certainly associated with a tired, lethargic quality. And it's very common for people in a big Neptune transit to feel like they need to slow down, or they're not able to keep up with the pace of life that they have maintained prior to now. What I thought was also interesting was that Neptune is opposing Saturn. And so the timeline for that, which is one thing I always like to share with clients, the timeline for Neptune opposing Saturn started in the middle of 2021. And the last exact activation of Neptune at 23 Pisces opposite her natal Saturn in Virgo, January, February 2023. And she gave her speech announcing her resignation towards the end of January. So we know Saturn is generally about responsibilities, about duties, about obligation, but it can have a little bit to do, particularly Saturn in Virgo can have a service-oriented theme to it. And so Neptune opposing Saturn may have created some confusion or uncertainty about the obligations and responsibilities she's had. And maybe she didn't feel that strength. You know, Saturn can give us our backbone. And with Neptune opposing Saturn, we don't feel that we've got that solid ground or that solid footing that we perhaps have had previously. So Neptune opposing Saturn, this sort of dissolving of structures in our lives, responsibilities, duties, and this desire perhaps for more ease, more rest, and perhaps less pressure as well. So that's been interesting. That's been going on for about 18 months. And as she got to the end of that transit, she realized, you know, she wanted to kind of really step down, let go, in some ways, give up a particular responsibility or duty. So that's the first timing piece for Jacinda. And let's take a look at the secondary progressed bi-wheel chart, because I always like to look at both when I'm doing timing for clients. And sometimes I'll work the two together, which I'm going to show you in this example. So what you'll see now is a bi-wheel chart. The natal chart we were just looking at has been shrunk down into the center, and the outside wheel are the secondary progressions for Jacinda. I just ran this chart this morning before recording this video. So February 10th, 2023. Now, again, we would ignore the angles in the progressed chart. We're ignoring the angles in the natal chart because we don't have a birth time. And we will keep our eye on the progressed moon, but we're not going to necessarily do detailed degree things with the progressed moon. But the one thing that immediately caught my eye when I looked at Jacinda's progressed chart was the progressed moon phase. And this is a really core part of working with secondary progressions, looking at the relationship between the progressed sun and the progressed moon. Now, I'm jumping right in here, assuming that you already have an understanding of moon phases and you're familiar with working in the moon phases in the natal chart. If you're not, I'm going to link to a class below that you can take to catch you up. And the theory of moon phases is the same, whether we're looking in the natal chart or the progressed chart. The only catch that I always want to remind students about, because sometimes people get this muddled up, is if we're looking at the natal moon phase, we're looking at the natal sun in relation to the natal moon. And if we're looking at the progressed moon phase, we're looking at the progressed sun in relation to the progressed moon. So if we look in that outer wheel, that bi-wheel, Jacinda's progressed sun is at 13 Virgo and her progressed moon is at 9 degrees of Leo. I'm also jumping in, assuming that you have a basic understanding of secondary progressions, which you may not. And the course that is just about to run, Predicting with Progressions, is going to take you through all the theories, all the techniques that you need to know to work with secondary progressions. But at this point, I'll just say very quickly, secondary progressions is a symbolic timing technique that uses a day for a year system. And so essentially what we're doing is looking at the planets when you were 42 days old and giving them meaning for when you're 42 years old. That's the basic premise of secondary progressions. It sounds totally kind of far out and trippy, but it is an ancient concept of linking a short unit of time to a longer unit of time. And it's one of the foundational principles of this particular technique. So if we take a look at the progressed moon and progressed sun placement, progressed sun at 13 Virgo, and the moon is sort of seems like it's close. But remember, when we're doing moon phases, we have to move forward through the zodiac in proper zodiacal order. So if the sun is in Virgo and the moon is in Leo, that is actually a moon in the last phase of the moon in the balsamic or dark moon phase. And this is a phase that is associated with closure, completion, and endings. And so when we progress through the balsamic phase in our lives, and everybody does, we all have 3 to 4 years progressing through each of the 8 moon phases. Jacinda is in her progressed balsamic moon phase right now. She's in the middle of her life by years, in her early 40s, but in a lunar cycle or lunar phase cycle that is to do with winding down, endings, closure. Some of the themes associated with the progressed balsamic moon phase are the hermit archetype, that idea of wanting to retreat. Being low energy is really correlated with this phase. And needing more rest and wanting to kind of hibernate, wanting to kind of slow down or get still for a period of time. And so if you, like Jacinda, are in your progressed balsamic moon phase, this is an excellent time for slowing down, offloading duties and responsibilities, taking more rest, restoring both your spirit and your body. This phase only lasts a maximum of 4 years, and then you're going to start a new 30-year life cycle. Jacinda still has a good couple of years in this progressed balsamic moon phase. The exact time that she comes out of this phase will, we can't really predict out without the exact birth time, but it will be, let me do this off the top of my head, 21 and 13 is 34. So it's probably going to be in the kind of 2.5 to 3 year, 3.5 year mark from now. So she's got a couple of years where that progressed moon is still going to be in that balsamic phase. So maybe a lower profile, more working behind the scenes for her. She is a woman in the middle of her life. So she's got plenty of time ahead of her for more engaging, demanding work out in the world, but probably not in the next few years. So here we see the progressed moon phase of the balsamic or dark moon at the same time that somebody is having that big Neptune transit opposing a natal planet, opposing one of the visible planets, Neptune opposing Saturn and the progressed balsamic moon phase. Two very different timing things, but a Neptune transit and the progressed balsamic moon phase, both associated with slowing down, letting go, and needing more rest. So her resignation speech, where she talks about not having enough in the tank to keep going, makes total astrological sense based on these factors in her personal chart. So hopefully this was an interesting little brief exploration of some timing things we can do with a natal chart, and also showing you how we can do timing with a chart that we don't have a birth time for. If you're interested to learn more about predicting with progressions, I hope you'll join me for my next live cohort of the Predicting with Progressions training program, which starts February 20th. And I'm going to put the link for this below. But for more free videos like this, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel here and hit like, or let me know what you think. If you would like to see me take a look at the chart of a particular famous person in a future video, let me know who you'd like to see featured in a future video in the comments below. Until next time, bye for now.